Are you looking to leverage the latest and best ideas to grow your advisory business from the best minds in the industry? Join us every Wednesday at noon Pacific for our speaker series, featuring dynamic guests sharing real strategies for real results. Brought to you by The Best Notary, where we help estate planning attorneys grow their business with less stress and more success.
Welcome to another session of the Best Notary Speaker Series. Today's guest is Brittany Hernandez, and she'll be talking about how estate planning attorneys use AI. This series is all about connection and about highlighting trusted advisors in the professional service space. The host of today's event is the Best Notary, and Eli will be introducing our speaker. But before we begin, just a few reminders. This presentation is being recorded. You'll receive a copy of the slides after the session. The recording will also be available later on YouTube. Feel free to put any questions in the chat during the session with Brittany, as she can reply to them during the session. And I will turn it over to Eli to introduce Brittany.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, our full-time COO. Glad to have you here full-time, Stephanie. So glad that Brittany's here. I met her, I think like over 2 years ago through LinkedIn networking, and we had an immediate alignment. And I flew down to San Diego within a few weeks, and we threw an event together. So I'm so glad to have Brittany here with us. Brittany Hernandez is a lawyer and a legal innovation ambassador for Gavel. Gavel is the automation infrastructure for the modern, scalable law practice. After practicing intellectual property law and representing clients in the entertainment industry, she shifted her focus to how innovations in tech can be used to create solutions for both clients and lawyers. Today, she helps other solo and small law practices harness the power and potential of advancements in tech to automate, innovate, scale, and diversify their revenue streams in her role with Gavel. She also created the first ever Gavel certification course series and is the founder of Variable Academy. So, Brittany, let us know how attorneys can leverage AI to stay competitive and add more value for their clients.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that great introduction. I'm just going to quickly send a request to share my screen if someone can approve that for me. And then I am going to just get my slides up. So can everybody see this? And actually, I'm going to do it one more time because I forgot to share sound. Okay. Everyone can see this okay? And you can hear me okay. Perfect. Yes. So thank you so much for that introduction, Eli. I'm very happy to be here. So as you mentioned, we're going to be talking today about how estate planning attorneys are using AI or how they can leverage AI in the law. And I'm going to frame this with 6 essential tips just to keep us kind of like in a structure. So I've already been introduced, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip to our tips. So high level, our tips are going to be, you need to really have a strategic client intake process. So I'll show you how people are using AI and leveraging automation in order to have information flow all the way from the initial point of collection through to document generation, how you can cut manual document drafting and review time using things like Gavel Blueprint and Gavel Workflows, as well as Gavel Exec as some examples from both the side of drafting documents to reviewing, negotiating, and updating documents. A harmonized tech ecosystem and the importance of that, consolidating and optimizing your tech stack. I've definitely heard a lot of people who say like, oh, I really want to use these 5 different tools. And it's like, well, actually 2 of those tools can cover everything if we want to consolidate and just use each one to their maximum potential. How to scale with legal productization and alternative billing models. So I'll show some examples of that. And just the importance of having an experimental mindset. And I'll share an example of me basically having panic attacks as I went and transitioned from the kind of perfectionist lawyer world to the iterative and innovative legal tech space where you have to accept that there's going to be bugs and you have to kind of work within that structure. So let's start with that tip. Before we go into tip number 1, let me just provide you with some key terms when it comes to AI so that you have a little bit of context if I use these terms throughout the presentation. I do recognize that I talk pretty fast, so let me know if I need to slow down. But we are recording as well if you'll be able to watch it back. there's so much content I want to get through. So just let me know and you can ask any questions as we go along. The first key term that you'll hear a lot, especially as you start exploring different tools, is LLM. So an LLM is a large language model that generates text based on patterns in legal language, in our case, because we're talking more specifically about the legal domain. So they're good at things like drafting, summarizing, and editing when given clear instructions, which is also leading us into the next one called prompting. And prompting is just another way of saying giving the LLM instructions. So this is how you tell the AI, whichever tool you're using, what to do. And the more precise we can be, the better output we're going to get. So instead of saying fix this as a more general instruction or prompt, think more close to something like redline this clause from the tenant's perspective. Hallucinations is something that I'm sure many of you have seen in the news and other contexts where AI would make something up that would be like a fake case, something like that. So it might invent a clause or misstate a rule if it doesn't have enough context. So context is really important, and we're going to kind of go into how you can inject context into different models as you use them. So you always want to double check critical citations. Context injection is that kind of piece that I mentioned around, like, if you don't have enough context, you need to provide more. What we're doing is we're giving AI more information or data sets to look at that provide accurate information so that it can improve its own accuracy in the response. So for example, let's say you're using some kind of chat interface and you want to be able to add documents of examples of past templates where that's the perfect template you want it to refer to, or it has a set of clauses that you want to be able to add in. Whatever the case may be, you want to be able to add that context into this environment so the AI model can look at that as an example or as something that it wants you want it to check against, for example. A playbook is your own firm's rules turned into AI checkable logic. And what I mean by that is you might have something that says, whenever you're reviewing a trust that needs to be updated based on new life circumstances, you always go through in your mind, or you have like in an Excel sheet somewhere or in a Word doc, remember to look at these 5, 10, 15 things and check clause. Always look for the clause around family situation and update from single to married if they got married or whatever the case may be. So this way you can actually turn those into playbooks inside of your AI model that you just say run, and instead of having to manually go through and look for all those different pieces, you can just say apply all, or look at all of these rules or individual rules and tell me if where in those areas we need to change something, and suggest a red line for what it should say now with this particular life change. So that's what a playbook would be. Token limits is something you may not come across too often, but with really long documents, you might have to break it up into two, in a sense of AI models can sometimes only read so much at once. So you might need to, depending on the token limits of the tool that you're using, break something up so that you can like add it as context versus one long document that is trying to read. The last one here is RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. You'll often see this in sort of the context of trying to mitigate the chances of hallucinations. So what it does, it combines AI with real data from your documents instead of relying on just what the model was trained on. So it's grounding it in more real world data so that you can reduce the chance of inaccuracy. So any questions here, just drop it in the chat and I'll take a look. But we're going to go now into tip number 1, which I talked about as capturing client information strategically. And what I mean by that is, I think in this day and age, with all of the tools that we have, if you collect client information once at the beginning, you should never have to retype that information ever again. So if we're able to, even from the first phone call, if a client is calling into your firm, for example, and they're saying, hi, my name is such and such, then I should be able to have that grabbed from the transcript and automatically added into my CRM or my customer relationship management or legal practice management software. I'm going to show you this example of one version of this. There's many different things that you could do. You could collect information from a client intake form, or you could have it pulled out from, let's say pull the email out if somebody emails your firm, etc. But I'm just going to give you the example of the first contact is a phone call. You use something like a Smith.ai as an AI receptionist that then transfers to a human to finish the call. And then from there, it's integrated with Clio as your CRM or legal practice management solution, connects then to your document generation software. And we're going to look at this flow from beginning of the conversation through to the end. Okay, so good question. We have a question from Sarah that says, how does that work with alternative spellings of names? For example, Sarah with an H versus Sarah without an H, or Eric with a C versus an Eric with a K. Very good question. So that's something you can also clarify or update in your CRM. So it's going to give you that starting point of like pulling the information into your CRM. And you can always clarify on your human call. Let's say it's pulling in your information from this caller, and then it's going to put that information into Clio so you can prepare for your call with that person. Or you can have your human caller who like picks up this next part, say, just wanted to double check on the spelling for that. Is that SARAH, etc. So good question though. And what I would mention here on that point is that a lot of the tools that we're all going to see and play with, they're going to have differing levels of control or like what they're trying to do for you. So in this case, for example, it's trying to pull as much information as it can for you into the next piece to make it useful for you. You can always edit and update that. And then now that it's perfect, be used in your document. So it's just trying to give you like kind of like that head start. Like I said, this is just a quick example. You don't have to use this in your practice, but just something to show you how people are using AI. This is going to be an example of a barber shop. It's not specific to like estate planning, but you can kind of relate the same type of intake information to your practice.
Thank you for calling Modern Cuts.
Can you hear that before I keep going? Okay.
This is the AI receptionist on a recorded line. How may I help you?
Hi, I want to know if you're accepting new clients.
Yes, we are accepting new clients. Is there anything else I can help you with?
Yeah, do you offer beard trims?
Yes, we offer beard trims as part of our services.
Okay, great. I want to book an appointment for a haircut and a beard trim, please.
Great, let's get you booked. May I have your full name, please?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Daniel Smith.
Thank you, Daniel. Is the number you're calling from 650-460-1895 the best number to contact you on?
Yeah, that's right.
Great, I've got that noted. Now, do you have a preferred stylist for your... The next step is to schedule an appointment for you. Please hold on while I transfer you to an agent who can assist with booking your appointment.
Hi, this is Charisse at Modern Cuts. I'm going to get you scheduled for a beard trim and haircut appointment. Is this Daniel Smith?
Yes.
Okay, so you can kind of see from that example that there is a way to, and there are tools where you can have someone call into your firm, have that information pulled, because then it's going to go feed directly and integrate with, in this case, Clio. It has integrations with other tools if you use like a MyCase or Lawmatics or Smokeball or one of the other many solutions that there are. In this case, it's feeding it into Clio, where it's going to handle the call, or even like a chat bot on your website, for example. It's going to automatically sync the call summaries and the contact information, such as name, email, and phone number, call duration, to that CRM. And then you're going to see that it's going to be added as a communication to open matters if that's somebody who's already in your in Clio, for example. So that's kind of an example of that initial call, collecting that information, it automatically getting fed through. To Sarah's point, you can always go into your CRM and make updates if you've had your call with that person and they said, oh, I actually spell it with a C instead of a K, or an H instead of no H. And then what you can do is that Clio data will now, I'm not going to make this one something that we watch, just kind of like reviewing it, like playing in the background here, is that what's going to happen then is the information will automatically sync with a tool like Gavel, where you can then take the information that is in your matter once you're all ready and you're ready to engage that client or prepare their actual documents by this process here that I'll show you now. So let's say, for example, they've called through the Smith AI, voice chat, they've had their information go through, we have a matter and a contact created for them now. And what they wanted was to prepare a power of attorney. So we have Olivia Lopez here. We've discussed a price. We have our responsible attorney. We've collected her information. We've got her address. We have who she wants to assign as her agent, etc. So now when you're ready to engage this person as a client, because we've already kind of had our design meeting and everything with them, what you can do is, this is what Gavel looks like from a Gavel workflows perspective, where a workflow is a series of questions and answers that you or your client would fill in order to generate and populate multiple different documents with your specific conditions. So from here, let's say you want to engage them as a client, you have your template already coded out here. I would just search through my list of Clio matters here. And in my case, I'm just going to say continue because I have this set up with all of my different variables, where a variable is basically the underlying pieces of it's a way of uniquely identifying things like contact's first name, contact's middle name, contact's last name, contact's full name with middle initial, et cetera, their phone number, all of that into my document. So actually in one click, I was able to, just by finding which matter I wanted, prepare this engagement agreement for her. So I've got our date pulled through, Olivia's information in different configurations, the name of the description of the matter. Additionally, with conditions here, you're able to say, for example, if the responsible attorney's name in Clio is Brittany Hernandez, then show Brittany's signature block. But if it's Eli's, then show Eli's. If it's this, then do that. Something we'll talk a little bit more about later is around the piece of additional integrations, like what we were talking about, kind of like from the collection of information all the way through to generation, and also in this case to signature, where in this case I could say submit for signing, and this document is connected through a DocuSign integration to automatically send, now that I've reviewed that and made sure I've checked for accuracy, send it automatically to the client first. Then once the client's done signing, it will automatically be sent to the responsible attorney for signature. Once that person has signed it, then all parties get their completed engagement. So that's kind of how we can see it go all the way from intake through to engagement. But what about document generation? So now what you can do, now that you've run this matter through a Gavel workflow, we can take advantage of something called the data manager, which is where data lives once it's been completed in a form. So I can see all the past times that I have run the limited scope engagement agreement workflow here, and I can download or open that session, but also I can see the DocuSign signing status. In this case, these empty ones are the ones I didn't send for submission or signature. The ones that say completed are the ones that have been completed by all parties, and sent for signature means somebody still needs to sign. Let me just check the chat. Is the document sent from Gavel, or what does the client see where it is coming from? Okay, so good question. For when you send the document, when you say submit for signing on that page, the email they'll receive will be from DocuSign, because it's being sent through the DocuSign integration. If you had it differently, where you had it as something that automatically gets sent to the client, not through DocuSign, but it just automatically gets, the documents automatically get emailed to them after you finish the workflow. So they wouldn't have signed it or anything. They're just getting like the draft version, for example, then that would say from Gavel. However, depending on which plan you're on, you are able to customize that so it could be from you. Another way you could do that is you could, if you wanted to say like exactly who it's from and like have very specific things in there as well, you could also potentially use like a Zapier or a Make to have a webhook that fires when the the workflow is completed, and then it runs through whatever specific email you said from and name you said from through to Zapier, then through to the email of the client. So
I think, Stephanie, if I could just quickly jump in, I think also DocuSign can let you white label emails, so it still comes from you. That's possible to do that if you have the enterprise plan, like we do.
Perfect. Yeah, so I guess it depends on which tools you have and what's most important to you as from the, like a branding perspective, and what would be when we go to the later part about like consolidating and optimizing. What tools are you already paying for and using, and how can you use those to get the desired result, right? Perfect, good question. So now that we're in the data manager and we can see all the past times that we've run this, I can see the one that we did just now, and I can select that option or multiple options to combine the different answers, for example, and push that into another workflow to prepare a different type of document or multiple documents at once. So I can say, for example, now that we've engaged the client and they have completed their signature, I'm going to take that person's session, and whatever is the same across that last session and the new session will pre-populate. Remember I said before, because we have so much technology now, I never want you to type something you already have stored somewhere. It's just about strategically like putting it into the next thing so that you're never like typing it in, because then you're introducing human error as well, right? We're introducing the opportunity that I have a cat that runs across my keyboard and like, you know, deletes the A in Bella or whatever. And so in this case, we got to skip over the matter information section because we already know which matter we're looking at. And because we know which matter we're looking at, I have this set up to pull the agent's name from that field in Clio right here, which would pull her name and her address into this section here. So I'm never having to retype that information because I already had it. So I'm going to go ahead and continue. And now I'm only answering questions that I didn't answer before in the previous one, which was the engagement agreement. In the engagement agreement workflow, we didn't ask about how they wanted their powers to be granted, whether they want to grant power over all of these different areas or just some of them, if they want to limit the powers. So in this case, I'm going to limit the powers to just these ones, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say continue. Do we want this to continue if our client becomes incapacitated? Yes or no? And do we want to list any special instructions? Yes or no? What you're seeing here is an instance of something called question logic. So if we saw this before as well, you can have logic that you decide what the logic conditions are on things like question pages, where a page is, this is a page called powers of agent, and this is a page called special instructions. So you could say, for example, only show the spouse collect their information page if on the client page they said their marital status was either married or domestic partnership, etc. So you can kind of get really granular about these. You can also decide and have logic around which documents output as default documents, or which ones are based on like if the person is married or not, if they have their spouse's versions of each of these output as well, etc. So Eli, do you want to talk about this one? Sorry, your comment about the disaster.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I just kind of want to say that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, copying and pasting, you know, we in our company are trying to remove every possible kind of human intervention because, you know, it could be disastrous, right? A middle initial or, you know, a notary's name could mean that that deed gets rejected. So, but this was like just out of like you know, I couldn't believe that $50 million was gone because somebody just, you know, didn't have proper tools to keep that address flowing through. And they lost $50 million because, right, they put, you know, you can't reverse a crypto transaction. So thankfully, most things in the legal world can be fixed, but you still want to do it, you don't have to. So yeah.
Right, exactly. For sure. So now that we have gone through and answered all these different questions, we can generate our document. In this case, I'm going to just generate a preview so that we can like check it before we trigger any automation that would send it to the client, for example. So in this case, you never even saw me have to interact with this information, but I can still refer to it and correct it if I need to. But I because we pulled it from before, it's just automatically populated here. We have our Bella Lopez as my agent. And in this case, I have logic in my document that says, show an S here if the person said they want multiple agents. Same for here for attorneys in fact. And then all of the what's called the repeating item. So a repeating item is when you don't know in advance whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 or 100 of those people. So I think, was it Vouder's wife who had a case where she had like 30 something beneficiaries and she had to like prepare the documents for all of them, and they were like, okay, there has to be a better way. So he made decision vault, which was so cool. Anyway, and then there's also logic here that says, and then obviously in this case, I'm just showing this for demonstration purposes. But in real life, the person would need to initial here, but just to show you that it's possible to say to the system, look at the name of the first name and pull out the first letter, pull out the first letter of the last name, put them together and put them in on this line, but only if these different conditions are met. They said that they want real property transactions when they said that they wanted to specify. Otherwise, take all of these off and only put her initials on one line. So just to illustrate the power of the logic here. And you can go on and see that actually in this case, there's a whole section that's missing here because that section is only relevant if the person said they wanted multiple agents, and it's how they would want them to act jointly or separately. So now that we're here, we can see that we were able to walk all the way from the beginning initial call, where we collected their initial information, through to conflict checks, through to engagement, through to preparing their actual document without having to retype anything. And we did it in the context of our 2-minute, 3-minute, 5-minute conversation here. So that is how we can harness some of that. And so part of that is with AI already, but the next tip is going to be related. So I'm just going to go to there now, which is to stop wasting time on manual document drafting and review, because the initial template for that power of attorney was actually not this. It was actually worse than this. It was actually a PDF that had no fillable fields. So I recreated it in Microsoft Word to make it easier to automate it, because just a static PDF form is just so frustrating to work with. Because you're like, somebody has to print it out, somebody has to like write it in, somebody has to scan and fax, or I don't know. So
question real quick.
Yes, go for it.
Brittany, could you show us like what the like interface looks like that does the logic? Is it hard? Do you need like to code it, or is it like a visual interface that says, if there's 5 agents, then do this? What does it look like?
Yeah,
kind of like
good question. Good question. Okay, so the answer to that is exactly what I was going to go into next, which is how do we use AI and that process to make that go faster?
Excellent.
So I'm going to show you what that looks like right now. So for a PDF document or a Word document, in either case, you can use a generative AI feature within Gavel Workflows, in this instance, called Gavel Blueprint. You won't see that name anywhere. It's just how we refer to it as a feature. So what you would do is you would say in Gavel, if you want to create, like what he was asking about is like the interface for creating the workflows, like and the questionnaires and how do you code the documents and things like that and tag the logic and everything. So what you can do is you can say new workflow right here. You can either start with questions, start with documents, or we have pre-built out ones for different jurisdictions. So you can filter by jurisdiction or by practice area, let's say estate planning or probate or whatever else. And you can see that somebody has already made these because these are like standard forms that everyone has to do, especially for things like probate, where you have tons of different documents and what's included. So you can choose to do that as well. But if you have templates, which is often the case, I know a lot of estate planning attorneys that have spent years and years perfecting their trust templates and will templates. So if you want to automate your own custom ones, you can do it this way. Like I said, there's 2 ways. We're going to do the start with documents, because the content of this discussion is specifically around like AI. Starting with questions is more of a traditional AI, which is like rules-based automation, which we will go into. But the point of it is just to say this particular feature also enables or is empowered by like generative AI aspects. So let's say that we want to automate this caregiver's authorization affidavit. And then I have another example of something that's not estate planning related or related to the caregiver, but just to show you like a Word version, not just PDF version of how to do this. So what you would do is you would grab these two documents like this, just drop them into the system here and say next. We're going to give it a name. I'm going to call it demo TBN. You would call it whatever you would want to. I'm just going to give this a clue to myself so I can take a look at it later. Now what's happening is that AI feature is looking at the documents and trying to help you create the workflow faster by looking for different fields in the PDF. In this case, that would be fillable like aspects. So for example, like the minor's name, and it's going to suggest how you would ask that question. In this case, what's the name of the minor? Same thing for the anti-coercion insurance disclosure for our mortgage here, where you have things like license number, loan number, borrower name. And then it's looking also for places that repeat. Now, in this case, we just have a very short document, so it's not like looking at 50 pages, but even if it did, it would look for places where the borrower name is repeating. So it would say, we're going to combine those 100 instances of the decedent's name into one question, and then we'll populate all of those. So we can edit these directly in this interface here to say, I don't want it to say what's the lender's name. Maybe the person I'm sending this to is the lender. So I'm going to say like, what's your name? Right, what is your name? So you can change what that says, or you can reject it altogether. For example, in this case, we don't need a variable here, so I'm going to reject that. That's just information. Same thing down here. I'm going to reject that one as well. And if there was anything else, I could reject it. But it is also going to add logic for things like checkboxes, where it's saying, is the caregiver a grandparent, et cetera, and it's saying there's a conditional value for this PDF checkbox that if this question is answered yes, then the field will be checked. And you can kind of get more nuanced than that. But what we're going to do then is say draft workflow. Like I said, you can make any changes there as needed. And then it's going to take us directly over to what's called the editor or builder view, where you can add any additional questions. You can still change what it says. So maybe you're like, oh, I actually do want to say what is the lender's name, right? So you can make any additional changes. It has broken these up into pages, as we talked about before. It's just whatever comes after continue. And we can move those around. Maybe we want the minor's information to be first and not the lender's information. Maybe we want the caregiver's information to be first, or whatever the case may be. We can move questions, pages, etc. around. Now, let's say, for example, I want to add an additional question that wasn't picked up on before. There's a part here on the bottom right called question. You would just say, I want to add a question. Let's call it a yes/no question. So I'm going to just drop it where I want it. I can add the question. I'm going to say, I'm just going to call this like yes or no question, just for our purposes, and call it like yes or no, just so I can show you logic. So now let's say I only want the minor's page. Like this could be in relation to, let's say, the client and the spouse. So let's pretend that I'm saying that the client says that they are married is the condition. So I'm going to say this little swirly branch right here, only show this page, let's say for the spouse's information, if they answered the question yes or no, whether they're married or not married, is yes. So now we have a condition around this page that says only show this page if the person says they are married. So we can save that. And once we make any other changes, we want to add any more conditions anywhere, we can say run. And now we have something that we can interact with. And we can see like the whatever has come through, yes or no. Now we have like minor's information. Now we've gone to lender instead of the minor's information because of that condition we put. And you can go through. And then, like I showed you before, all the way through to the end and output the document with all of the different pieces here. So that is how you can quickly and easily automate your documents. Some are more complex than others. So sometimes you might want to engage a Gavel expert to help you if it's really like a really complicated logic scenario, for example. But the idea here is that you have this tool that you have tons of control over what the conditions are to output which documents, show certain questions, hide certain pages. You can do calculations such as date or number calculations and so on. So the idea here being that you can take your custom templates and turn them into automated workflows that then sync and connect to whatever you otherwise have. It's a slightly different process. If you are using Clio, you would connect, you would have a Clio Matter question, and then you would use the document tagger to like put the different variables that are relevant. I'll quickly show you that piece. So if you wanted to, let's say like we wanted to change something about where the minor's name lives, or we wanted to make this conditional or whatever else, you would just go into document templates and say edit tags, and then go to where you want to go, and then say like, I want a condition here or a different variable. For a Word document, I'm going to quickly show you what the Word tagger looks like, or the document tagger. So let's say that we want to make a change or add logic to our Word document. What you would do is you would open up your document. You can see that it's added in the different code for you that we already did in the first step. Then we would sign in. In this case, I'm going to go to this one here. We're going to find our TBN January 7th workflow that we've been working on. And I'm going to say something like, show this whole paragraph when the answer to this specific question is yes, or some other value. It doesn't just have to be yes or no. You can get a lot more nuanced. You could say like, if this is yes, or this is not blank, or whatever else you want to do. Or and you can really get granular about what you want to do. Once you're done making any changes, we're going to select our document that we want to replace, in this case, this one, and say update in Gavel. And now those changes have been reflected. So the next time we run it, the document will output with that condition. Okay, I know we went through quite a lot there. So I just want to pause and see if there's any questions for that kind of document automation piece.
Curious, like how many hours it would take to set this up for a standard estate planning attorney. Let's say they just want to outsource it, if somebody build it. What kind of investment are we talking about in terms of, an expert or just an experienced builder?
Good question. So it depends on whether you like, let's say, for example, you have a paralegal and you want them to be like your Gavel person. Maybe you have them like play around with the system, get used to it, watch a few courses, like take a few courses or whatever else. And then that person is your person. So it'd be the cost of their time building this out. If you were going to outsource it to a Gavel expert, then they're going to range from about, let's say, $75 an hour to up to like $300 an hour, depending on how complex it is, whether you like want somebody who's like gold certified. So depending on the complexity of your document, you would have to get a different rate or like range. And then you can kind of see, let's say you have a 50-page document. It's not really about the length of a document. It's really more about how many like different variables and conditions are in that document. So you could have a 50-page document that has like 2 variables, right? They just need their name at the top and their name at the bottom. So it's more about, I've had a 1-page document that was extremely complex because they wanted one document to be able to do like 50 different things. So to answer your question, it is going to be a range, but that's the kind of range you'd be looking at depending on if you're going to use like somebody internally or somebody outside. And you can kind of see based on what I was showing you, like it takes this amount of time to go logic, add logic, if this, then that. So I'm working on a project right now where let's say like a will for both a client and a spouse took about, let's say like 10 hours at whatever rate. So you could be thinking about it around that. How does the information from the client get into the documents in Gavel from a Clio questionnaire, from Decision Vault? Good question, Bridget. So it depends on how you want it set up, but you can have it come from Clio questions. If you use Decision Vault also have a Gavel integration. So you can have, what you would do is you would, from within Decision Vault, there's an option to connect your Gavel account. So you would do that first, then you would be able to see in your Matter the option under, like, I think it's called integrations. Click on that and say Gavel. You would just have to map your fields one time. So you'd say like the question that asks about like lender information, let's say like client name is mapping to client name in Decision Vault. Or the specific question about the trust date or the trust name or whatever from a questionnaire. So you can do it like that. If you aren't using Clio or aren't using Decision Vault and you're just using Gavel by it, you can either have your client fill this out, but because you can make these client facing. So you could send them the link or assign it to them. There's also client portals to do that as well. And the person could be filling that out. Some people choose to like have the conversation with their client and the attorney or paralegal is completing the Gavel questionnaire. So there's lots of different options there. We're going to be switching now to a completely new tool. So if we have any questions, more questions on the one that we just saw, please just drop it in the chat. But we're going to move now and switch our mindset to a completely different topic. So now we're talking about reviewing, redlining, updating, or negotiating documents with AI. So what we saw was a combination in this Gavel workflows with the questionnaires and all of that. What we saw was really more of a combination of generative AI in the case of being able to drop in our documents and have it pull out information, and then a blend of that with rules-based automation, which is that if this, then that consistent logic that we get to add, right? Which means, though, that if you wanted to change it, you would need to change it manually. It's not going to change by itself. But it allows for more consistency in output and predictability. So different trade-offs. Okay, now we're talking about something like using generative AI to update a trust after we've made one for a client who then, at the time we made it for them, they were single, but now they got married and they have kids now and they bought a house and now they have cars and they, whatever the case may be, and we need to update their documents. So this is an article that I'll put in the chat that's really useful around a lot of the different things we've touched on today, specifically around how you can use this for how you can use something that we're going to switch to, which is Gavel Exec, to like review and revise those trust documents for life changes, create checklists, client-friendly legal document summaries, summarizing tax implications, which is a good one, and drafting things like one-off custom provisions. So we're going to look into that now. I'm going to use the example that I mentioned, where let's say we have somebody who started off with us drafting like a single person's revocable trust, and now they've gotten married, or they've like inherited property or whatever else, or they inherited property and remarried. So we want to have this document reviewed and have it highlight any instances that might be relevant for us to update, just as a quick one, right? So with Gavel Exec, distinguishing that from the document automation tool we just played with, we're going to look at this demonstration. This is not real customer, like client information. This is a Word add-in that you install from the add-in store here, similar to like the document tagger that we looked at before, but this one focuses on that kind of like review redlining aspect. So from here, let's say we have this 27-page single person revocable trust here, and I want to do what I said about going through and redlining. We can either drop that right here in the chat and say like, the client recently inherited property and remarried, quickly identify all clauses needing updated in this trust, or we can use something called quick action, which is here. So for example, I could say draft an additional clause about XYZ thing. I want you to add it before the recitals and conveyance section. I want you to be detailed and explanatory, and I want to add any like additional context, which we talked about before, injecting context by adding additional documents about this case or matter, and then any additional instructions. In this case, we're going to look for any red line opportunities. So we're going to say red line. We can say negotiate this. Well, this is not really like a negotiation, but let's just keep it at market. We represent the settler. If we wanted to add in like their new like deed, anything information about their spouse, for example, or children, or any other pieces of information that might be helpful here. Let's say that they inherited a home. We could like add any deeds or any other pieces here. So for our additional instructions, we're going to say the client, let's say like the settler recently inherited property and remarried. Quickly identify all clauses needing updates in this trust. And I'm going to say red line. So once I say red line, it's going to start giving me high priority, medium priority, and low priority options to red line. So I can see those and filter through them. So I could say, for example, once it's done, just show me the ones that are high priority and only apply those and apply them all at the same time. So we can see, for example, as it's going through, it's looking at things like we need to update the marital status to reflect that marriage, which impacts spousal rights and administration. So changing this from single to married as of the date of the most recent administration amendment of this trust. So I can just go ahead and say, show me where you're going to put that. And I can say, add that as a red line. So that's how that works. Like I said, okay, I have 2 children, provided, however, that references to my children include any stepchildren. So they're adding a stepchildren section because now this person got married, only to the extent expressly added, etc. So I can go ahead and add that one as well. Like I said, that one is medium priority. So I can say, only show me the high priority ones. And then I can say, okay, I like that. What about like unintended inclusion of stepchildren after remarriage, etc. So if I wanted to, I could also just say apply like all of the suggestions or whatever. So that is how we can start to use AI to review and revise and update estate planning related documents like this. You can also do things like this, like have a playbook where you have your own rules that say, for example, in an advanced directive, if there isn't already a medical assistance or medical aid in dying clause, suggest that I add one. So if we're not looking at an advanced directive in this case, but let's say we are looking at an advanced directive. Then we might use that rule or run that playbook and have it check against that one to say like, hey, you don't have one, you might want to add it here. So I can say run that rule. It can show me if it fails or if it passes. And if it fails, it might suggest different red lines that would be relevant for this particular document. In this case, an advanced directive. You can have multiple rules here, not just a single one. So there could be, in this case, let me go back really quick to show you these ones. So these are like pre-built out ones where they have like, this would be more relevant to like a commercial lease agreement or something. But let's say if they don't have a force majeure clause, make sure that you add one. Or if there is one, focus on notice and duration, so on. Okay, thanks, Sarah. And I know we only have a few minutes left, but I just wanted to make sure we kind of got through just showing you what this looks like, what a playbook looks like. And then projects is a way to, instead of having to always add context documents that you might use over and over again, you can just create a project if those files are going to be consistently related to that person, matter, practice area, anything else. And then you can add specific instructions just for that project, matter, etc. And also you can see, like in my case in the past, I said, based on the files that I've added to this project, is there anything inconsistent in them or anything that I should update? And then it just said like, no, these all look good. Maybe in the past I wanted to say that I wanted to like suggest a red line to add a MAID clause, medical assistant in dying. And in this case, it will just kind of like take a look at the document, see if it wants to give you some different options that you would change. In this case, it says in this section, Provided, however, that if at the time of such determination medical assistance in dying is lawful in this jurisdiction, then I especially authorize that my representative can, and I consent to this particular thing. So you can see kind of like how you would add that here and then go ahead and add it there. So now you've been able to kind of see this example. Oh, sorry, Bridget. I know it's a bit overwhelming because I'm packing so much in, but I appreciate you coming on. I know I'm showing you a lot. I just wanted to pack as much value into this as I could for the time that we have. I think I dropped the link to that, or did I not? Just check. Yeah. So I dropped the link to the article that I was referring to, and that will have some different examples that you can kind of try out if you want to like test this, for example. Okay. Thank you, Eli, for adding that. We already looked at some examples. Now let's go to our last couple of tips. I know we spent a lot of time on the first two, but those were really, really important pieces. So the next one here is pretty straightforward, right? It's just to create a harmonized tech ecosystem with integrations. And this is really like what we talked about with how can we use tools that work really well together, right? How can we make it to where it data seamlessly flows from initial point of contact and collection through to our legal practice management solution, through to our document generation or automation solution, and then having that be, having our, let's say in the case of review, redlining, and negotiation, be where I work, which is in Microsoft Word, instead of having to copy and paste something from a web version like that. So that's how we can kind of seamlessly, and also in that case of, can I have my document generation tool sync to my e-signature tool? And my ability to like email out the documents to the client, or have them, in the case of if you're using Clio, you can set it up to where the documents go back into the same matter. So there's lots of different things that you can do to make the system work automatically together if you consider all of the different things we talked about as far as strategy. Tip number 4 is to save on subscriptions by consolidating and optimizing your tech stack. We really talked about this before, which was around having that kind of ability to look at what we have. If somebody says like, oh, I really want to use Lawmatics for intake, but I want to use Airtable for this, but I want to use Notion for that, but then I also want to use Clio for this, and I want to use Gavel for that. It's just like, what do we have, and what in each tool has enough of the things that we could get rid of another subscription? We can save some money there as well. Or do we just need to like upgrade to one tier higher, but we can get rid of another subscription, etc. You kind of get the idea here, but it's more about, instead of like adding more tools, can we use more of the tools we already have, and how do they relate and interact with the other tools we want to use? So the other piece here in the last few minutes is going to be around scaling and optimizing. Thanks, Julie. Good to see you. So the other piece is around scaling with legal products and thinking about alternative billing models to help us scale, so we're not stuck in that kind of billable hour model. So we have lots of different examples of different attorneys who have then seen the opportunity with these different tools to create legal products or to productize their expertise, which in your case would be a good example is Indus Counsel, or this one has some estate planning packages. So somebody could, for example, go onto here and say, I want to purchase the estate plan for a couple. They get to review which documents are included, what the fee is here, and they can just say buy now. That's going to take them over to a Gavel client portal. In this case, they can see that they're going to pay for this one, and this one's going to be at the time right before the documents were generated. They can go through and say start session, and that's going to take them over to start answering their own questions so that they can generate once they get to the last question, they're going to pay, and then the documents will generate after that, because that's the way that this person set this up. So they'll go through and they'll answer details about the trust, the spouse, the marriage details, the beneficiaries, nominees and guardians, etc. Okay, so that's how we can do some productization. I'm going to skip a couple of examples here. And just note that you can start to kind of move away, and there are many different options that are alternatives to the billable hour. As you start to use more tools, you're going to find this more urgent because you're going to want to avoid what I like to call the efficiency penalty, which is now that it only takes me 2 minutes to generate these documents instead of 4 hours, how do I still get compensated for the value versus the time? So just think about that as you go through. Lastly, I would just leave you with confronting your fears and starting today with an experimental mindset. I talked earlier about how when I was transitioning from being a practicing attorney with clients to the more of the legal tech space, as you work with vendors, you're going to note the difference between you two, and just kind of coming through with that mindset of they are here, they're only in business if they're actually providing a good service to you. So if you find something in the tool that's not working, or you want it to be different, or you want a feature added, vendors are very open to your feedback. So just give them the feedback instead of just cutting the relationship off entirely, because this is a process of iteration. And it's something that I had to really get used to. So I only have 30 seconds. So I'll just say thank you so much for having me. And you can reach out to me directly at Brittany@gavel.io. And if you're interested in starting any trials of the things that I showed you today, you can use the code TBN50 for 50% off your first month of the document automation piece, or TBN Exec5 for 5% off your first month of the add-in that is the redlining and negotiation tool. That's it for me.
Oh, Brittany, that was incredible. Thank you so much. I feel like I learned a lot too.
Amazing.
The product's been growing and expanding. Thank you for that generous offer for our clients. We'll definitely add that to our beta of our marketplace that is slowly taking shape. We are very, very excited to continue to integrate with Gavel as we build our own stack. So thank you for coming and talking to us.
Thank you for watching the Best Notary Speaker Series. Come join us on Zoom every Wednesday of the month at noon Pacific and 3 p.m. Eastern. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get notified when new episodes are released. This speaker series is sponsored by The Best Notary, your trusted document concierge from Maui to Maine.